Hey, this is America at Night with Dom Giordano, proud homeowner. We can get into that in Philadelphia. That's a rarity today. Median age, first home is 40 now. That's amazing. So there are two big affordability issues. One, stuff like the grocery store, right? That's going to be somewhat dealt with by the Trump administration. But the despondency brought on for young people not able to get into their own home is a big issue. And Eric Eggers is the Vice President of Research at the Government Accountability Institute, author of Fraud, How the Left Plans to Steal the Next Election, and co-host of its podcast, The Drilldown, with Peter Schweizer. Schweizer, you might know, somebody who exposed how the Pelosi's and others make all that money in Congress. And they recently did this piece on two things, the 50-year mortgage, as an example of they want us to be a nation of renters. Hey, Eric, welcome to America at Night. And I guess the opening question is, who wants us to be a nation of renters?
The bad people, Dom. Very, very bad people.
Okay, yeah.
And, yeah, I mean, ironically, kind of what got us started down this road is that the Donald Trump suggestion that a 50-year mortgage could be in the offing. And ironically, I've been working with Peter Schweizer at the Government Accountability Institute. And when we first started our organization, which was co-founded by Peter and Steve Bannon back in 2012, we read a thing that talked about how actually the most expensive entitlement the U.S. government has, it's not welfare, it's not food stamps, it's not a number of things. It's actually the home mortgage deduction, the interest on your home mortgage. And so when I saw the 50-year mortgage proposal, I was like, man, I bet the banks love this idea, but it doesn't actually save regular people any money. But it got us looking into how have things gotten more expensive and why. And what we discovered is that, there's several different forces at work. And I applaud your, kind of flex about being a homeowner. Congratulations. Unfortunately, that's a less attainable feat for people these days. And the World Economic Forum actually published an essay in 2016 called "You'll Own Nothing and You'll Be Happy."
Yes.
The title of that article actually came from something called "Welcome to 2030." So it's interesting because you've got this immigration push, which obviously the World Economic Forum people are pro open border, and then you've also got a lot of environmental regulations. But it's really interesting to consider the confluence of circumstances that are making home ownership more expensive and therefore less attainable for a growing number of people in this country, and we're the worse off for it.
Well, absolutely. Let me say I am not a fan of the 50-year mortgage, but I do have people in Philadelphia, conservative listeners. They argue we got to do anything right now, Eric, to get young people into homes, and then they start to make all kinds of wild arguments. To me, it's not just the total cost, which you break down. It's the fact that you're really not owning that for how many years? How long do you have to be there before you have even a smidgen of ownership? Say you're 30 or whatever, you're going to be 80 when you've actually owned the home?
Well, and by the way, that's a relative bargain when you consider the fact that Japan, as we mentioned in the podcast, actually has 100-year mortgages. So, that's an accelerated timeline. Of course, in Japan, they think in terms of dynasties, not decades. But no, it's a real thing. I think that it's part of the larger conversation that you're now seeing the Trump administration pivot towards in terms of just taking on affordability. That's why they're floating the idea of sending subsidies directly to people to help lower insurance costs. Why you see them talking about stimulus checks. They're considering a lot of things. They're even talking about suing cattle ranchers, I guess, because they think that is somehow connected to inflated beef prices. But the reality is home prices now are basically a 5-to-1 price-income ratio for household income. A while ago it was 3-to-1. So you'd have to have an average household income of $140,000 to afford the median home, which I think, as you noted, is about $400,000. And that's out of reach for nearly 3 out of 4 Americans. So we have a real problem here. Lots of people have made a lot of money off of the increase. But then, we've had this open border situation. So you've got millions of people coming into the country. We had the supply has not kept up with the population.
Well, let me stop you there, Eric, and ask you, because Vice President Vance brought that up the other day. For listeners, how are these people coming in illegally, basically? How are they able to get into those homes then?
Well, I think it's not that they're owning homes per se, although the Trump administration actually froze the FHA's giving of loans to people who are not citizens. Now, that's not the same to say that they're here illegally per se, but the number of FHA loans that went to non-citizens went from 2% to 6%, which is a significant increase. It's not a huge number in the grand scheme of things, but at least the Trump administration recognizes, hey, we want to prioritize American citizens. And so, I think what's happened is you've got these illegal immigrants. They come in, they get government housing, so that kind of jacks up the rent. So that's going to drive more people from the renting class to the home owning class. And, it just increases the demand. And when supply doesn't go up commensurate with demand, then prices go up.
So, Eric, let's break down what are some of the solutions and what do you guys say they can be doing? I've had Congress people say, we got to get the builders together. Is there a red tape issue that's blocking them? Could they make lower cost housing? What do you guys recommend?
So, yeah, it's a great question, Dom, and I'm interested to hear what you think, what the best solutions you've heard from the lawmakers you've spoken to. Part of it is, I think, the Trump administration, and Stephen Miller is starting to do this. He did it on the news last night. They got to connect some dots because, and I'm sure you've covered the election results from a few weeks ago, the gubernatorial race in Virginia, the gubernatorial race in New Jersey, heck, even the mayoral race in New York City, where you saw Mamdani get a significant amount of immigration support. Part of that is the erosion of the Hispanic and Latino support for the Trump administration and Republicans in general. He had 40% Hispanic Latino support. It's now down to less than a third, and you got 2/3 of Hispanic and Latinos saying the ICE immigration raids are going too far. And why I say that the Trump administration needs to do a better job of communicating is they need to say, listen, it's not because we hate the person who washes your kids or cleans your home. We think forcing immigration law is actually going to be part of the solution to making things more affordable. We've got to decrease demand, and we think it's actually a solution to helping improve this affordability crisis, because right now I think they're losing that argument. And I think people don't see the connection between immigration enforcement and affordability.
I would agree, but I was quarterback in my station in Philadelphia, Eric, the coverage tonight of Jack Ciattarelli going down. And if he had lost, I thought he was going to lose by under a point, or she might lose by under a point, and he got killed by 13 points. Were you aware that affordability, and how, put it in quotes for now, was going to be the issue in these gubernatorial contests? I didn't see that.
Well, I knew it was going to be an issue in New York City, and that's actually,
sure.
Maybe it's a separate conversation, but maybe it's not, because I think what people actually chose in Mamdani is his offering of a solution of affordability. He was basically saying, look, we get it. New York's a failed city. Things are way too expensive. And by the way, there's also a crime problem and lots of other issues. How about we make things more affordable? Now, his solutions are terrible, but you actually have – I live in Florida, Dom, affectionately referred to as the free state of Florida, and we have even a candidate for governor here saying, listen, Mamdani is kind of on the right track. He's addressing the root cause of the problem, which is affordability. His solutions are bad, but his diagnosis of the problem is correct, and that's why you saw him be successful. And if he's successful in New York, I think the same root issues are, kind of tend to carry over in New Jersey and Virginia. And I'll just say quickly, the fact the federal government was shut down, you had a lot of people not making any money for the month before the election probably didn't help.
Absolutely. All right, Eric, stand by. I'm fascinated by this because this is a crisis. I think Eric agrees with that, where we are with this, but there are solutions to it. 833-482-5337. And Eric works with Peter Schweizer. You heard the founding of this group. And the 50-year mortgage, thank God I got somebody sane on this. I'm parrying people off in Philadelphia. Well, what's wrong with that? At least you'll be in the home. Yeah, you're in the home. It's like you're a house guest for 50 years, though. Come on. Japanese 100-year mortgage. Can you imagine such a thing? All right, you get on board. We'll talk with Eric a little bit more, and we'll come back to that military nonsense put out by Democrats. You're listening to Dom, D-O-M, Giordano, sitting in on America at Night on Westwood One.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, welcome in. Dom Giordano with Eric Eggers, Vice President of Research at the Government Accountability Institute, colleague and co-host, I guess, the Drilldown podcast with Peter Schweizer and Eric. So, Eric, what do you guys talk about on the Drilldown?
Yeah, thank you. We talk about basically different problems in American society. We say, okay, if everyone recognizes, like, for example, this affordability crisis, if there are problems, how come they don't get fixed? And who makes money off of the status quo? You mentioned the 50-year mortgage before we went to break, and just to kind of remind people what the math is. And this is a personal issue for me, Dom. When I bought my last home, my wife and I were fortunate enough to be able to pay it off fairly quickly, but we did so after getting a 15-year mortgage. And somebody said to me at the time, they go, 30-year mortgages should be illegal. And the way they stack the amortization schedule, so the first few years you're paying primarily interest, and obviously the government incentivizes that as a tax write-off, but it's a giveaway to the banks and the financial institutions. And very few people make money. In fact, no one makes money off of fiscal responsibility. So when they floated the 50-year mortgage, like, man, this is weird. But we just kind of do deep dives into things like this. We did a podcast today on the Arctic frost investigations, and the senators are trying to make money off of the settlements that they slipped into the provision to open up the government. I mean, it's crazy, the stuff people try to get away with. You mentioned Nancy Pelosi and her stock trades. We've been on that from day one, and we kind of talked about the insane volume of stock trades that have been happening in Congress recently. And so I don't think it's a surprise that Nancy Pelosi is saying she's willing to leave Congress, because she had said a few months ago she wasn't going to do any more stock trades. So the gig is up. She's not trying to make any more money, so she's done.
Well, let me ask you about that, because this came up. I don't know about Spanberger in Virginia, but we were really involved, and she got caught by a local New York radio, Charlemagne the God, asked her about $7 million, Mikey Sherrill, the new governor of Jersey, and she said vaguely, well, her husband dealt with that, and she sat on all these committees that directly were involved in this. And you're right, Eric. I think a way of breaking through with the public when they hear this to be outraged, it's not just the money, but it's the sheer volume of this. The volume tells you what they're up to.
It's crazy. Is the people who say they're the most against allowing members of Congress to buy and sell individual stocks are the ones that do it the most. Ro Khanna, who's running for president as a Democrat in Congress, he's got an insane volume of stock trades. Now, he would say it's his wife that's sitting there doing it, but the reality is that's just not okay. That's actually how we started our organization. Is after 2012, we looked at and we found a study that showed that while the average hedge fund might beat the stock market by like 11%, members of Congress beat it by like 15%. And so the conclusion to draw is either members of Congress are really smart, or they're participating in something that shouldn't be allowed because they have access to information. And we saw, look, people are sitting on these committees and they get information and then they call their broker or whatever it is. So we've been calling for a while for a ban on the ability of members of Congress to buy or sell individual stock. It seems like an easy solution, but the practice is widespread. It's bipartisan, and it's a real problem. But that's just an example of the stuff that members of Congress think they can get away with. I know we touched on briefly. I mean, think about this. And again, Senate Republicans. So the whole government was shut down because they said Democrats refused to support a clean continuing resolution. They kept wanting to add extra stuff in there. Yet, when it came time to open up the federal government, Senate Republicans inserted a provision that would have allowed the people who were spied on by the Arctic frost debacle to be paid millions of dollars because they could sue the government of taxpayer money for that violation. So, it's weird, the stuff they want to get away with because they think people aren't paying attention.
Yes, and you guys definitely are on that. Now that I know about the drill down, I've become a listener, subscriber to it, and I'm going to be searching you guys out. What's next? What are you guys looking at next? This is certainly the affordability. Well, let me ask you an affordability question. As I see it, we talked about the despondency part, the long term, the housing thing. Is it more difficult? Am I right? You can knock down energy costs. Trump has done that. But the grocery store stuff, once that gets crazy, any number of products that are the tariffs, so you guys in the camp, as I am, that say, I'm not a tariff guy. I give Trump some grace to deal make, to settle this, that, and the other. But in the end, isn't he admitting by removing some of these tariffs, 200 items, that they're part of the problem here?
Well, I mean, clearly, right? I mean, let's just be intellectually honest about it. When their solution to the affordability crisis is to get rid of the things they implemented in the first place, it's an admission, tacit or not, that did make things less expensive. And I supported the idea of it because, I listened to Scott Bessent say, listen, more people than ever took European vacations last year, but more people than ever also used food pantries. The economy is working for some people and really leaving a lot of other people behind. And that's why now when Donald Trump touts the stock market, it's not great because that's exactly the problem. Is the stock market was up under Joe Biden, but many people were not participating in this level of economic growth. And that's why Donald Trump had this record coalition of blue-collar voters and people without college degrees.
Exactly.
And they have yet to see kind of real benefits. Now, I do think the grocery prices are coming down, but let's say if things were up on average by $3 under Joe Biden, and now they're only up by $1.50, the regular people will say, look, it's still up, And so I think that's part of the Trump administration's need to do a better job of messaging. They need to say, listen, we're not where we want to be, but we are getting better. And that's where I think they've got to connect the dots with saying, listen, everything we're doing because we're trying to make things more affordable. This all falls into the same umbrella. It's not about race. It's not about, xenophobia. It's about affordability. And I think that they're starting to kind of work that into the messaging more, but I think they could do a better job.
Well, that's the model, the one thing to take from Mondami. He wakes up, hi, I'm Mondami, affordability. Hey, it's affordable over here. That's what you have to do. It's there to connect all these policies to that, and you guys are doing that. Eric, pleasure to have you tonight. Hope to get you on in Philadelphia soon.
Dom, anytime. Great. Congratulations on your success. It's fun to be on the Westwood One. It always makes me think of the NCAA tournament. But congratulations.
Yes. Thanks. Eric Eggers here on America at Night.